Hey everyone, it's Flying Kraken here, and today we're going to be talking about some really exciting stuff today. Today we're going to be talking about the Murder at Castle Nathria Druid cards. They are finally all spoiled, and I'm very excited to talk about them. There's just so many cool cards. We have Death Rattle, we have Nature Synergies, we have a Chia Pet Dragon, and everything in between to talk about today. So let's get straight into this video. We got a lot to talk about. We're going to talk about the Death Rattle package first. I think that is the least amount of cards to talk about, so I think it's just the easiest to get through first, and it's going to take a lot of deck building to get through all this stuff. But let's start with the location. And if you haven't already seen the locations are objects basically on the battlefield that people can't really interact with. But you get uses on it based on the number of little armor down here, the durability of it, and then they close for a turn. They open up the turn after you use them, so you basically have a turn in between using it delay to use them. And Druid got Hedge Mage, which is a 3-mana one that triggers a friendly minion's death rattle. Really simple effect, really powerful effect. I think that it's kind of like it doesn't do a lot on its own. It requires other minions, obviously, but I think the powerful effects of death rattles that are coming to the format and for the future is something that can make this card really powerful. And yeah, and if you hear that on the video, that that's um, it does matter. It does matter, Ronak. We care around here. But we do have all these things. This is one of those effects that, like, I guess, from here on out, they're going to have to be more careful about what they print in death rattles. And I think we should go on and talk about kind of what we're doing with those death rattles. I think this card is deceptively powerful and possibly one of the most powerful of the locations, depending on if death rattle, um, all that kind of stuff. So what are we doing with death rattles? Well, I guess first, this is what we're doing. This is the last Druid card that was spoiled today. It's Death Blossom Whomper. Whomper is the funniest name for a Druid card I've seen in a very long time. She is a she because it says we call her Audrey the Second. She was named after her mother. So her mother, the tree's mother's name was Audrey too. And we have 6 mana 7/6. So good stats for a 6-mana card. It's pretty big. Battle Cry. Draw a Death Rattle minion and gain its Death Rattle. This is exactly what Death Rattle decks are going to need to work going forward. If we had not gotten this card spoiled today, then I would honestly have been like, Death Rattle is going to be really hard to make work. But this was like, I saw this and I was like, whoa, this is the card that we need to make it work. The little incremental drawing specifically a Death Rattle minion and gaining Death Rattle, so you know what this is going to do. You're going to fill your deck with big Death Rattles, and you're going to limit the amount of Death Rattles in your deck, and you are going to just play all the good big death rattles and all your ramp cards and all that kind of stuff, and you're going to make this work. I like this card a lot. Very excited to use this card. I'm finally glad they gave us a 6-mana card that we can play in a deck, because right now Druid just goes straight from like 3 to 5 to 7, and there's skips over 6. Basically, there's no 6 drops we want to play outside the Turtles card, and that card really sees no play right now. So very excited for Death Blossom Whomper. Audrey the Second. I'm very excited for her. And the other Death Rattle card we have here that goes along with the little package is we have the legendary Druid card, Cecily of the Fey Court. She is an 8-mana 8/8 taunt. Big thing there. Death Rattle, draw a minion, reduce its cost by 8. I think that taunt's a very big thing on this. This card's effect is extremely powerful with the Hedge Mage too, where you can play this, you can activate it immediately. If you play Audrey, then you get her effect immediately, and it creates this like kind of like chain where you're drawing cards, discounting cards, drawing cards, discounting cards, and her having taunt means that unless she is silenced, then it will happen immediately and all that kind of stuff. So very excited for this little package. We're going to have to Scourge the neutral cards to see what death rattles we can do. I think I saw some earlier, so stay tuned for the death rattle decks coming forward. I can't wait for that. I don't think we have any death rattle cards here, but we do have some other just good Druid cards. Let's talk about the other legendary, the build around. We have the Chia Pet Dragon, Topier the Shrub, the Gazer, something like that. I can't really pronounce it. But this is starting the whole nature package thing from Druid. The kind of the build around card, right? It was 7 mana 5/5 dragon, Chia Pet Dragon. You know, just letting people know. Battle cry for the rest of the game. After you cast a nature spell, summon a 3/3 whelp with rush. This card just seems really powerful, and if there's an efficient way to get her every single game, then, you know, whether that's making her the highest cost card in your deck and then drawing her from the paths card, or just discovering her off Moonlit Paths, which in that case you get 2 copies of her in her decks. That's 2/3/3 whelps per nature spell. And they gave us a ton of very efficient nature spells to play this upcoming format, which we already had a good amount. So now we can basically fit our entire deck with nature spells, and if we play her, we're just constantly getting value. And I don't know if this has been confirmed or not, but this is a whelp in its name. So I assume the whelp also keeps Onyxia alive, right? Because Onyxia stays immune as long as there's whelps on the battlefield. So this helps a ton, and I think that honestly this is maybe one of my favorite legendaries that Druid has since Ysera, you know, was in standard a while back, you know. And I think Cecily is also a really cool thing, but man, I love this like Topier here. He's really cool. But what cards have they given us to help with that? Well, the first card they spoiled to us kind of to start doing with the whole nature package and all that kind of stuff is this 2 mana card called Natural Causes. Natural Causes is a very efficient card, I'd say. It's a 2 mana nature spell, deal 2 damage, summon a 2/2 Trent. So on turn 2, if they play a, you know, let's say turn 1 you played your Living Roots and you create 1/1s, and they played their 2/3 on curve, and then you go into, you trade one of your 1/1s into it, you make it a 2/2, you play this, you kill their 2/2, you get a 2/2. That's really efficient, and it creates tempo back in your favor, which I know people don't like to use that word, but that's I think a pretty good use of the word. And it's nothing fancy, but it does its job, and it goes face. Just remember that. That means that that means that Living Roots and this card goes face. A little bit more face damage for the Aggro Druid decks and or Nature Druid decks. And I think it's a really simple way to start it off, but we have some more nature spells to talk about, so let's get right to it. Another one I want to talk about is another cheap one we got right here is Planted Evidence. Planted Evidence is a 1 mana nature spell, discovery spell. It costs 2 less this turn. So first card that comes to mind when you see this card is Nature Studies. You know, both nature spells, both kind of do kind of the same thing, a little bit different. You know, Nature Studies, you could hold on to that discount for another turn or two, and you could make any spell cost 1 less or whatever. But this one replaces the versatility of the discount with raw better discount. And I think with so many nature spells in standard, being able to cast a nature spell into another nature spell is going to be really good. Personally, I think this card is going to be very good on turn 2. You're going to play this card on turn 2. You got Wild Growth, you have Plot of Sin that's coming up. You have a ton of 3-drop cards that you can choose from. And then 2 mana cards are obviously, you know, 2 mana cards are obviously free with this card. But I think the big thing about this card is it discounts 2. And that's such a big deal, because that just means that like you're casting Nourish on turn 4, and so you have Overgrowth again back in standard. And that's why they did not let this card discount things outside the card you discovered, because this card would be so much better than Nature Studies if it could do that. So smart for them to do that. This card's gonna be really powerful. Gonna be played a lot of Druid decks, I think, going forward. Very excited to play with. And another nature spell coming up is Plot of Sin. We mentioned it earlier while talking about Planted Evidence. This is the Infuse card for Druid. It is a 3 mana nature spell. Summon 2/2 Trents, infuse 5, 2 5/5 Ancients instead. So you may be thinking, infuse 5, that's a lot. Infuse 5 seems impossible. I mean, it's not going to be super easy, but it's not going to be super hard in a token druid deck. And honestly, I bet this was like Infuse 3 at some point, and then they realized, no, we can't do this because that means that's a 3-mana 10/10 on turn 3 a lot of the time with Living Roots and all the other like Trent cards you can do and all that kind of stuff. So this is they tested this earlier, I think, but 5 is probably the right around there, the right number. It's another one of those infuse spells that also helps trigger infuse in the other version of this card if you have both copies in hand and all that kind of stuff. Same with the priest card and the priest infuse card. And I think this is a pretty deceptively powerful card. I think you're going to be seeing 5/5 Ancients a lot and pretty easily. But depending on all the trends and all the tokens and all the things that can come back from death rattles and all that kind of stuff, I think you're going to see this a lot in Druid, especially token and nature Druids and all that kind of stuff. And with the Whelp card we mentioned earlier from Topiary. You know, and so now we have some other spells to talk about the Druid before we talk about the my favorite card of the Druid set. So we were spoiled 2 cards at the exact same time for a Druid with Nightshade Bud and Convoke the Spirits. So we're going to talk about Nightshade Bud because Convoke's going to bring up a bigger conversation, which is an 8-mana nature spell. Choose one, discover a minion from your deck to summon or a spell to cast. So this card is just like pretty good in a lot of Riot Druid decks. Unfortunately, I think this could make Celestial more consistent, but I don't know how much more consistent. But I think this is going to be very, very good for some big spell Druid decks and also for some big Death Rattle Druid decks because you're going to be able to summon Cecily or any of the big Death Rattles you want to do or anything like that. Like you're going to get to choose from it. And if you choose a spell, there's a ton of Druid spells that like you just wish you had every single game, and sometimes you draw them out of curve and it makes you lose the game. Like you know, Wild Growth, not Wild Growth, but the Growth card that where you draw 3 cards and get the taunt, or Scales of Onyxia, or Nourish, or there's just so many good spells with Druid you're going to want to cast with this. And I think that it's just super, super good. Going to see a good amount of play, I believe. And being 8 mana, I feel like it's fairly balanced. It's 8 mana. And granted, it's Druid, so you're going to be able to play this on like turn 5 or 6 or something like that. But very, very excited for this card. But I know you're probably expecting a lot of happiness from this next card. But honestly, this card kind of disappoints me a little bit. I didn't really think that Druid needed a Yogg Box. I thought that this card I do think is the same power level, if not more powerful than Yogg Box, because this card will make boards. If you notice, all the Druid cards either draw you cards, make tokens, buff tokens, or create value in some instance. I think this card is going to be very, very good. They even changed it. This is another one of those cards that, like, in the preview for the card from Rarin, they had to announce that they changed the card immediately after the video because they've been testing this card and they realized, yeah, we can't have this do 10 spells. 8 spells is going to have to be the right number or something. And it's still going to be really powerful, 8 spells, I believe. And it's a nature spell, so you're going to play it in the Topiary deck. I'm just very upset that this is, like, the route they went for the last Druid epic, but you know, we'll play it. We'll figure out what the best deck for this card is. We'll keep spirits high. If Druid players want to play it and people want me to make the best Druid deck for this card, we'll definitely make it happen, guys. So don't you worry about that. And our last Druid card that we're going to talk about, and possibly my favorite of the set, is the good boy himself, the Widow Bloom Seedsman. 4 mana 3/2 battle cry, draw a nature spell and gain an empty mana crystal. So this card, if you ever play Magic the Gathering, is very, very similar to Solemn Simulacrum, which is also known as Sad Robot. It's basically a better version of that card because you draw the card immediately and it's not a death rattle. And I think drawing a nature spell. See, drawing a nature spell seems like it's gonna be like a tutor, but I feel like Druid's gonna be playing so many nature spells that it's gonna more be like it replaces itself card. But that's something we do need to circle, is that it draws a nature spell. So we need to look at how decks can be built, and if there's versions of decks where they can like limit the amount of nature spells and only draw the really powerful ones. But that's something to keep in mind. And he's super good. He's an epic for a reason. I'm glad we have 4 mana ramp back, and we don't just like we either do the 3 to 5 thing, or we just lose. You know. I know a lot of people aren't gonna like seeing more ramp, but he just seems like a super solid card. Nothing broken. Nothing that's gonna break the format or anything. But super solid, and he's a good boy. And that's all the Druid cards, you know. I enjoy talking about the Druid cards. I really appreciate all of y'all. If you appreciate the content we're putting on the channel, you know, hit that like button, bonk that subscribe button for more Druid content, more Druid decks, talking about Druid concepts. And we got some series coming up in the future that I've been working on. Just been really busy lately that I hope y'all like. But happy diving, everyone.